All righty, everybody. It is time for another episode here on Hey Docs, and I am so excited, Albert, to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, Jill, I'm thrilled. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you having me.
I have been waiting for you to be on the show because talking about real estate and unpacking an area that I live a lot in with my startup doctors is a real passion of mine. So I'm wondering, just to start us off, in case somebody does not know who you are or does not know about Xite, would you mind giving us a little history into how you got into commercial real estate, how you got in with Xite, and then talk a little bit
Sure.
about the company itself?
Yeah, sure. Roughly 15 years ago, three of our four partners were working for a large commercial real estate firm, just doing boring stuff, office and industrial. And then they had a Patterson rep reach out to them and basically said, "Hey guys, can I take you out to lunch? I've got some questions for you." So they sat down, and the Patterson rep was telling the other three partners, "Guys, my doctors, when they're opening up for business, they're taking way too long to ramp up. They're struggling to get off the ground." And so at that point, those guys, they put their heads together and they said, "Hey, let's see if we can create a data-driven approach to finding sites that are going to be favorable for a dentist to come in and to not just keep their head above water, but to really come in and thrive." And so at that point, like I said, roughly 15 years ago is when Xite started to come about. And so they started the healthcare division of that large commercial real estate firm at that point, did that for a few years, and then a little over 10 years ago, branched out and started Xite. So that's how the company got formed. As for
Great.
me, I'm one of the vice presidents here. I've been here. This is my 6th year working with Xite. And I actually, right out of college, I was working for a government defense contractor, completely, obviously, different field. Yeah, completely different field. And I was actually the guy who is my boss, our senior VP today, Brandon Foley. He was one of my mentors. And we were getting together monthly, and just he was pouring into me. And then at some point he just said, "Hey man, I just got promoted to VP and I'm looking to hire somebody." So he pulled me out of the government contracting world and pulled me into real estate about 6.5 years ago. And so that's how I got into this world.
Oh, that's great. And here you are now. And I know you're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
such a resource to me, you and the Xite teams. I am glad that he pulled you in and said, "All right, you're on my team." I work with a lot of commercial brokers out there and commercial teams out there. And I know that you guys do it a little bit different, maybe, than some of the other groups out there. And I've heard you say this before, where you guys take more of a data-driven approach to helping doctors find locations. So I'm curious if you would talk about that and what you as a team do at Xite and really helping doctors find their location, but how you're basing that on some data out there.
Yeah, sure. We really try to come in and differentiate ourselves from any of the other brokers in the market in a couple of different ways. So one is being that traditionally today, when doctors go to look to open up a practice, they're going to find a broker, hopefully who specializes in dental or at least medical. And then they're going to go and they're going to say, "Okay, let me go and let me pull in some demographics or some
Hmm.
competition analysis independent. And then I'll just try to piecemeal those together." So what we have done is we said, "Hey, let's go and let's put both of those things under the same roof." So to where the guy who is going and looking for the real estate, he is also the one running the demographics. He's also the one running the competition analysis. So what this does for us, and the huge benefit allows us, is one, it allows us to make, whenever we sign on to work with a new doctor, each doctor has a little bit different idea of obviously what their vision is, what they're
Hmm.
looking for, and what data factors and demographic factors are important to them. So
Yeah.
we're able to come in and build custom packages for each of our clients based on their needs and what is important to them. And then in addition to that, and I think this is really the big kicker for us, is when we go to run the competition for an area, what we found is there is no data source out there that you can go and just click a button and have an accurate competitive analysis run.
Hmm.
It
Yes.
just doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And believe me, we've tried to go out, we've tried to buy it, and we couldn't find it. And so basically what we've had to do is we've had to have our in-house data team go, and whenever we are running a competition analysis, we're going to run a report. But from there, then we've got to pull out. When you run those reports in, it pulls in additional specialists that are not actually your competitors. It's going to pull in if an office was sold, it's going to pull in one. It's going to count one for the office that was there previously, and then one for the office as it was purchased. And so you're going to have a lot of inconsistencies there. But the bigger one is going to be whenever we are calling around on properties in a market to see what vacancy there
Mhm.
is for us to go and open up a practice. Oftentimes, what we're going to come across is a landlord broker is going to say, man, you just missed us. We just signed a lease with an orthodontist here last month. They're going to be opening up in 6 months. Or, hey, man, you just missed us. We signed a lease 2 months ago with a dentist that's going to be doing ortho, and so we can't take your use here.
Mhm.
So what that allows us to do is to go and to factor in those competitors that anybody else, any data company, any dentist driving around, any orthodontist driving around, no one is going to know about those competitors popping up until they open for business and they're looking across the street staring at another orthodontist.
Yes. And I love that you guys do this. As you and I both know, this is so valuable. This is really the foundation of what we need when we're getting ready to
Mm-hmm.
open up a startup practice or to purchase a practice. Just really knowing beyond income and beyond some of the other factors that are super important. We really do need to know about the competition and what that looks like,
Sure.
so that as doctors are getting ready to get going, they really know how to position themselves and what that market saturation is going to look like. So I, again, really appreciate that that's part of your complete package that you do. Now, as you guys are moving along, one of the things that I get asked all the time, and this is why it's so much fun to have experts on the show here, is I get asked all the time, Jill, should I lease or should I purchase? And what do you think is better? And I would love it if you'd jump into that a little bit with me. Let's say we are a doc out there that has identified a spot. You guys have come to the conclusion that, okay, we're going to be able to really make this area work. Now I think it always comes down to, is it better to lease for 10 years or purchase? You want to explore that a little bit with us and talk about what, when you guys are advising, working with clients?
Yeah, 100%. So this is a question that we get, I'd say at least 50%, maybe
Yes.
75% of the time when
Yes.
we're jumping on and we're getting started working with a new doctor. So the short answer here is it's better to buy.
Mm.
Now, that's a very. I'm going to add a little bit of color to the picture there. Whenever you go to look for a location, it is better to buy if all the other stars align.
Mm-hmm.
So what we always tell doctors, and this is something that I feel like may be related some to a little bit of pride of being able to say, hey, I own my building and I don't pay rent to anybody. I think there's a little bit of that, but there's also maybe just a little bit of just not being educated
Mm-hmm.
on the actual benefits of owning the real estate versus having a practice that is going to set you up for a much higher production.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we're looking at lease versus purchasing, what I always tell doctors is when we're going to run this search, we can look at purchase options and we can look at lease options, and let's put them up together side by side. And if the purchase option comes back and we analyze all the factors and we are confident that this is where you're going to produce the most, this is great. That's icing on the cake. Let's go for it. But what we never ever want to do is go and say, I'm going to sacrifice on the quality of my location just to say that I own the real estate. Because that's where you
Mm-hmm.
get doctors who, they walk around and they got the gold star on their chest to say, hey, I own my building, but I'm producing $500,000 a year. Versus the
Yes.
doctor who's leasing, and yeah, maybe they're paying 80 grand a year for their lease, but they're producing 1.2. So let's run some simple math here.
Mm.
Yeah. So short answer is if you can find an option to purchase that is going to set you up for the best possible production, the quickest possible ramp up, buy that thing all day long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if
So
not, sign a lease.
yeah. And the way I look at it, and I know both of us have similar views here, is everything that you just said. You can have that real estate in your portfolio, but if it's not the right real estate in your investment portfolio, it may or may not help you in the long run. And as I always tell docs, sometimes I'll say, hey, as to what you were saying, if we can get this really great piece of property and you still want to be an investor in a piece of property, do that separately.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't always have to be combined. And then I feel like sometimes that really frees our docs up to be like, oh, you're right. Like maybe that is a goal of mine in my wealth building strategy to have properties and whatnot, but it doesn't always have to be tied to our practice. So I
100%.
love that it's not just, oh, you will be more successful. Cause I think that that's what a lot of the doctors think is I will be more successful if I own my building versus lease. And I think that's exactly wrong. You will be successful if we choose the right location and if you do the
Hmm.
work to get your practice off the ground. The building is just the icing on the cake, as you said. If
Hmm.
everything lines up, that could be a good option. Staying in this lane and we're deciding, do I lease, do I purchase? One of the things that I also am curious if you could break down a little bit is if we were to say, hey, we've been out there looking and it's not necessarily aligning for us to purchase. And I think there's a whole episode just to talk about purchasing, but let's say we're finding a lease space and we're
Sure.
moving towards that. I think the next thing that we really have to talk a lot about, and I just really try and educate my doctors, and I think it's so beneficial to have brokers that are what's the word I'm looking for? Really working to our benefit. And I think what we get into is there can be some really ugly things in leases.
Sure. Sure.
and
Sure.
and what we start off that process with the LOI and we're asking, I always tell my docs it's like volleying. We're playing a little game of tennis here. We're going to throw out what we
Hmm.
want and the landlord will throw back what they want. But eventually we get to that lease component. And I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the areas that you guys are really helping to advocate for doctors when they are looking at their lease, because it can feel, I think, super overwhelming when you're looking at this 20 or 30 page lease and going,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what does all of this mean and how do I make my way through it? So would you mind talking a little bit about what you guys are really working for when you're working with your clients?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So when it comes to negotiating the terms that are going to go into your lease, obviously this is very nuanced. There's a lot of detail that goes into it, and so I'll hit on just a few. First off, what you want to always make sure of is whenever you go to negotiate on a property, never go off of the landlord's letter of intent that they're going to send you,
And
because
I
they,
want you to say that one more time. Just say that one more time.
yeah. So never ever use the landlord's letter of intent. And I'm not only saying don't accept what they send you, but I'm saying don't negotiate off of their form that they're sending you.
Hmm.
Because when they send that, you've got to realize that is 100% geared in their favor. It's geared to be
Hmm.
very high level, very broad, very generalized, and it's geared to leave out the things that are actually going to be important for your protection. So when you see that, generally it's going to be 1 to 2 pages. It's going to hit the high points. It's going to hit rental rate. It's going to hit TI. It's going to hit term. All that just very general stuff. And they're going to say, okay, great, all looks good. Let's move on to a lease negotiation. Let's get into the details and into the weeds here. But rather than doing that, what we recommend is make sure that the broker that you're working with is handling all of the big ticket items on the front end before you get to a lease and
Hmm.
before you've lost leverage. Because once you get
Hmm.
to a lease negotiation, the landlord knows, okay, hey, we've got them down the road. They're invested in this. They're investing attorney dollars. They've invested time into this. And so the chances that they give in on some of these things that they would not have given in on the front end is higher.
Yes.
So what we want to do is on the opposite end of the spectrum, we want to come in and while we have the very most leverage, we want to come in and we want to negotiate the big ticket items up front day one before we ever get down the road, before we waste 6 weeks or before we bring an attorney into this thing. Obviously, we're going to come in and we're going to use our letter of intent form, which compared to the landlord's at 1 to 2 pages, ours is 7 pages long. So it can get also a little bit overwhelming, but the reason that we want to come in and we want to hit them hard with a much more detailed letter of intent is we want to just make sure that everything that it would be a deal killer for us in the lease, I want to know if the landlord is willing to get on board and give us what we need day one. And if they're not, I don't want to spend another 3 weeks on it or get into bringing attorneys in and
Yes.
wasting more time and money. Obviously, as we talked about, the basics are, hey, let's come in and, landlord on rental rate. Landlord says $30 a square foot, and we say 26, and they say 29. We say that's very basic. Anybody could do that. My mother could do that.
Yep.
There's nothing special about those basic negotiations on the economics. But what you really need to make sure that you have in there to make sure that you're protected is the things that really you're only going to see if you're doing these transactions and these ortho and dental specific transactions day in and day out. So I'll hit on a couple here just that are, you read through an LOI, you would never blink at it. One, if we're looking at a new construction building, we have the ability to come in and request that the landlord would deliver the building with adequate power for our use. A lot of doctors don't know.
Huge.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to be able to run your CBCT or your Pano, whatever you're using, on just the regular power that they deliver for a Jimmy John's or for a Sprint store. You need more juice than that. And so if we can come in and we can have the landlord put that in beforehand, that can save you $5,000, for example. Yeah. And so there's one. And so here's another. Whenever we go and we put in our initial LOI, we're going to put that the landlord will bring the power to the back of the premises. There is a very specific nuanced difference in the word premises and the word building. If a doctor was to read this and it said the landlord will bring power to the back of the building, that is not to the back of your space. And so what that means, and we've had this happen before, is the landlord can run power to the back of one far corner of the building and say this building is 20,000 square feet. At this point now, if we don't catch this and get and put it in there that they have to bring it to the back of our premises, the back of our space, we can be left holding the bag whenever we sign the lease, where now we've got to pay an extra $10,000, $15,000 just to pull power from one end of the building over to the end of our space.
Huge.
Yeah, so that's another one out. And the last one I'll hit on here is this is one that most doctors, they whenever we first introduced this concept, they never even heard it. And that's the concept of being able to sign your guarantee and assign your lease in the event of a sale. So this is something that typically I'd say this is where I see most of the deals that we get down the road that end up falling apart. They die because of this specific issue, and they die because of this. They die with this issue because we recommend our clients that they do not move forward and sign this. And so I'll walk you through how this plays out. When you sign a lease, you're going to sign a personal guarantee typically, and that's going to say, I guarantee that I will pay all of the lease payments for the duration of this lease that I'm signing on for. So that's standard, no big deal. But what we do need to have in there is that whenever you go to sell the practice, or if you were to say sell the practice, you want to be able to, one, assign the lease to whoever purchases the practice. But two, and you have to have both of these in there, you want to be able to assign the guarantee in its entirety to whoever purchased the practice. And so what happens here is if you miss this, or if you just have, hey, I have the ability to sign the lease and not the guarantee, two things can happen. One, you can go 10 years down the road and say, I'm ready to ride off into the sunset. I've made my money, made more than I expected because I used Jill, and now I'm ready to sell. And so the landlord, you can have a buyer lined up and go to the landlord, and the landlord can say, actually, hey, I like you as a tenant. You've been good. You paid rent on time. I'm not going to allow you to sign this lease. That could be one. Or two, they could say, yes, absolutely. You've been a great tenant. You can assign this lease. But you're going to stay on the hook as a guarantor as well, in case this new buyer that I don't know, if they step out of line, I'm coming after you personally.
Yes. And I am so glad you brought this up, because I have seen this with doctors who have run into this, just like you have run into this problem. And these are the things, docs, if you're listening, these are the things that are hidden in that lease. And I know we've been talking about the LOI and the lease, but these are the things that, and why it is so important that we use a broker to represent you versus you trying to do this yourself, because I will guarantee that you are going to miss something. and it's these little tiny things that don't seem like a lot, but when it is a big deal, it is a big deal. And I even saw one, I'm just going to use an example, where I had a doc that part of the guarantor was they had a clause in there that even when their lease was up, even when they could leave and be done with it, not even selling it or anything, just leaving, that they were still on the hook for for
Wow.
guaranteeing that space after they had left the space. And that's nuts. That's just absolutely nuts. But those are the things we have to pay attention to. So I
Yeah.
always love it. I always love it when you're out there advocating for my clients, because I know we are not going to miss these little things. I know we're talking about leases and just how that works and what we need to be paying attention to in the LOIs versus in the lease. But I'm curious to know too if you've got some thoughts on when this somewhat dovetails, but we're going to go backwards a little bit too, but it just came to mind. If there's differences that you see if a doc is doing a new build, so that ground up versus what we call it, the vanilla shell or whatnot. So if they're looking at a property that's going to be built, they're still going to lease it, but it's going to go from the ground up, versus if they are looking in and we've just got this vanilla shell that we're going to be walking into. Can you talk to that a little bit? And if there are things that docs should be aware of, and maybe things that we should be putting into that LOI, like maybe if construction isn't done on time or different things like that. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because again, I definitely do not believe that it's one size fits all. What we're looking
Sure.
at with an existing build out is completely different than if we've got somebody in there that's going to be working for the next 6 months to build out our space for us.
Yeah, 100%. A couple things I hit on that. So I'll start with just the existing. If there's an existing building there, the biggest benefits you have there is just speed to market. So if it's there, all we have to do is go in, negotiate a lease, and then boom, you get your GC started, and you're open from the day we start looking for sites to the day you're opening for business. Let's say 7 months. So time to market obviously is very important. Now, the benefits that you get with doing a new construction building, there's a few of them. So one of them is whenever you go to start the beginning parts of your construction where you're running your plumbing, a lot of times we can get landlords agree to let us go and run the plumbing before they
Yes.
pour the slab. And so that's
Yes.
going to save you in your construction budget, because your GC is not now having to go and
Mm-hmm.
saw into the concrete and then bring concrete in to re-pour over it. They're able to do that beforehand. One, that's going to be cost savings. Two,
Mm-hmm.
if you can, again, coming back to what we were talking about power requirements, if you can get them to deliver the space with adequate power requirements, that's cost savings. And then in addition to that, you have the ability, one, to come in, you sign a lease, and then you're waiting on the building to be constructed. And so now you've really got the benefit of being able to come in and spend as much time or much more time than
Yes.
you would have if the building was delivered, to come in and put together your marketing plan, to really spend time on your design and make sure you get it just so exactly the way you like it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much less of a rushed process.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then just one thing that I'll hit on as far as, and you touched on this, Jill, but when you go and we are negotiating on a building that is not yet delivered, we always want to put some teeth into the delivery dates that they are telling us that they are going to give us the space. So if they're telling us, hey, we will deliver you the building by July 1st, 2024, we're going to say, okay, great. If you don't, every day you're late, we want a day for day rent abatement. So if you're 5 days late, I want 5 extra days free rent. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you are more than 60 days late, I want the ability to terminate this lease.
Yeah.
And so what that does is, one, it makes it to where we're not handcuffed. If the landlord is 6 months, a year late on delivering the building, we have the ability to walk away and go and find something else rather than just sitting here with our hands tied. And then if they are a little bit late, if they're, say, for example, we've got a deal that is, I want to say it's probably 6 months late now. And so the doctors, obviously, they're frustrated because the developer hasn't delivered the building, and the developer's frustrated because the city's not doing what they're supposed
Mm-hmm.
to allow them to deliver the building. But either way, though it's frustrating that they're late on delivering the building, our clients are going to get a year of free rent.
Yeah.
And so, because we put that in there versus
Mm-hmm.
just, oh, hey, man, it's just late and sorry, tough. You just got to wait. And that's it.
Yeah. Yes. And again, why I love the fact that we are thinking about this, talking about this, and because you and I have both seen it. You've got one going right
Yeah.
now. My 17 years, I have seen this happen more times, unfortunately, than I would like to see. And that kind of, brings me to also something that I'm seeing, and this is maybe a little bit more current for where we're at right now, but I'm even starting to see where we, even on the existing spaces, because the cities are so ridiculously tough right now with our
Mm.
permitting and whatnot, where we're actually starting to write something in about maybe where rent isn't starting or some things are not kicking in until we know that we've got permitting, because sometimes,
Hmm.
again, it's not anybody's fault. We're
Hmm.
waiting on an entity that's completely out of everybody's hands. Have you guys
Sure.
seen that and done anything like that too?
Yeah, yeah. So it's typically it's market to market. So, for example, in South Florida,
Mm.
that's something that whenever we go, whenever we go to put the construction period in there, it's always 150 or 180 days from the receipt of permits,
Mm.
uh,
Yes.
versus from signing the lease or from delivery of the building, because we know that that is a problem.
Yeah.
Versus in Dallas, it's like, hey, that there's no problem with that. It's not an issue, and so we can tie it to 150 days from delivery of the space.
And I think that goes to just knowing the market,
Hmm.
having your broker understand, because
Sure.
again, that can be, boy, that can be a real booger if you did not have that verbiage in there and you went
100%.
ahead and agreed from signing of the lease, and you guys are just ticking away those 180 days when
Hmm.
nothing is happening, and now you're in
Yep.
there as a doc paying rent. Nobody wants that. We want you making money.
Yep.
We want you appreciating that free time. So let's talk just a little bit about what states are you in? What services do you provide? Is it different depending upon the state? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. Most of our brokers are going to be either in Texas or Florida. Most of our kind of boots on the ground hired under Xite. But the way that we have come in and made it to where we can work nationwide, so we've done deals from Anchorage, Alaska, down to Miami, is whenever we go to a new market, say for example, if it's a market that maybe we're not licensed in, or maybe we don't have boots on the ground, we definitely see value in having a local guy there to be able to provide the local market knowledge. And say, for example, if there is a new development coming up that's not being marketed yet, it's good to have somebody there to be able
Mm-hmm.
to come in to tell us about that. And so what we'll do is when we need that, we'll go and we will hire whatever market we're in. Say if we're in Virginia, we'll go and we will hire a local broker there who is their boots on the ground, and we will pay them for their local market knowledge. But
Great.
then we will still handle the negotiations, and we will still handle the demographics. We will still handle the competitive analysis, because though there is value in having someone there physically, and we recognize that, we know that the doctor still needs all of these other things. They
Mm-hmm.
still need to know that where they're going is not saturated. They still need to know that they're having somebody negotiate for them that knows everything that is going to be important to them for protecting them for the duration of their lease. So that has made it toward, yeah, there's nowhere, as long as it's in the U.S., there's nowhere that we won't go. But yeah, so that's the way I answer that
Yeah.
question.
Well, I love it. It's like this team
Hmm.
approach. You've
Yeah.
institutional
Hmm.
knowledge of Xite
Sure.
and
Hmm.
everything that you guys know to be working on. And then you've got that boots on the ground, as you said, from a local broker that was going to be able to,
Sure.
still meet with the clients and still meet with everybody out there and help them. So that's great. So as we finish up here, gosh, again, I could talk for hours about this, because this is an area that definitely I live in, not on the negotiating side, but just working
Sure.
with my clients. If you were to leave us any 2 or 3 points that you think docs need to be thinking about, as maybe it's as they're going into what we're foreseeing coming into the commercial market into this next year, anything you think
Sure.
that we did not hit on that you want to make sure our clients.
Yeah, yeah. If I had to leave you with something, what I leave you with is this: is when you go to look for a site, really you need to make sure that you are looking at not only the site but the kind of the community around it holistically and what is going on. We don't want to just fall into the trap of, hey, this is a pretty building. Let me go in and negotiate a great lease here and just hope for the best. Because
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, okay, hey, what does the growth look like in the area? Are there any new schools or new grocers being built around? Again, like I hit on previously, are there any new competitors coming in that we don't know about? But another thing to consider, and this is a conversation I was having with a partner of mine yesterday about a previous Xite client, was we had a doc that we were going into to open up practice for. There was a new high traffic, high growth area. We came in and we found the spot on the hard corner, and she's floored excited about it. We saw that the rest of that corner had not yet been developed, and so we said,
Mm.
hey, let's go and let's dig in and let's go see who owns the rest of this corner and just see if we can gather any additional information. So as we did that, we saw that the owners who had the other parcels, we knew that those guys were notorious for always leasing to dental users. And
Mm.
so we came to our client and said, hey, Doc, here's the deal. I know you're excited about this site. I know it looks great. But from our experience, what we think is going to happen is these guys are going to build their buildings, and their buildings are actually set to deliver before yours, and they're going to lease to a bunch of other dental users, and you're just going to get out and just you're going to be sitting here staring at five other competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward, she took our advice. She backed out of the lease. Fast forward today, there's 7 dental users
Wow.
on that one corner. So we call that corner Murder Row, is what we call it. Uh, so I just say, just be aware not only of just, hey, do I like the building and do the demographics show well and does competition show? That is all great. But if we're looking at it holistically, let's also look at what is the potential for new competitors also to be coming in right around me. And I can't make a decision based on fear of, oh, a competitor may come in right here across the street. But if I'm going into a corner it has 10 buildings being built versus I'm going to a corner that's already fully established and just has one new retail strip being built, that is something that we can at least
Mm-hmm.
factor in.
Yeah. Oh, good information. That's great. As we finish up, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, wants to get a hold of Xite, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, great question. If you want to get a hold of just Xite as a whole, our website is xiteco.com. And then my email is miles, miles, at xiteco.com. So best way to get in touch with us, I'll drop my cell is 214-738-9489. And yeah, that's the best way to get in touch.
Awesome. Albert, this has been great. Again, you've just dropped a bunch of really great knowledge on us. And I know that my listeners were frantically taking notes, probably rewinding. Okay, what did he say there? What do I need to have? So thank you. Thank
Sure.
you for spending some time with us and just giving us all those really great tips when we're looking into whether we're going to lease, whether we're going to purchase.
Sure.
So as we finish up, the way I like to finish up Hey Docs is to do a little speed round. Are you up
Okay.
for the speed round challenge?
I accept.
Excellent. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, black.
Yes, that's a man after my own heart right there. All right, favorite book?
The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer.
Oh, I have that one. Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
good
that's
one.
good. That's
It was
good.
it was. Favorite outdoor activity?
Jill, I live in Texas, so right now it's not really safe to be outdoors with how hot it is for now. But if we can get out early enough, yeah, I'd love to just get out and take my son fishing or get out and shoot some ski.
Oh, love it. Love it. All right. And if you could be remembered for one thing, what would that be?
Mm. Remember for one thing, I really would say, just if I could be remembered for one thing, I'd say the way that I loved others.
Oh, that's great. And then best piece of advice you've ever received?
I'll go with one recent here. It'd be hard to put the best one ever, but recent is actually a scripture that I read the other day. It was First Thessalonians 5:16 through 18,
Mhm.
which says, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God for you in Christ Jesus.
Oh,
So I'd say that's one that's been hitting on me the last couple of days. So it's
yeah.
top of mind.
Yeah. And isn't that amazing how scripture will do that to you? You can read it
Oh,
one
yeah.
time and it may not resonate as well as it does another time when you read
Mm-hmm.
it. So, yep,
Absolutely.
That is wonderful. Again, Albert, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll definitely have you back. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, Jill.
Mm-hmm.